Have you ever seen a flame begin to flicker, not because it lacks fuel, but because it's been starved of air? That's what happens to the heart that spent its life burning brightly for others, never once breathing in its own warmth. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the soul begins to suffocate beneath the weight of unreciprocated kindness. And in that moment, something ancient stirs within. Not anger, not despair, but a kind of clarity that's almost holy. A clarity that whispers, "No more." For the kind-hearted, this change doesn't arrive like thunder. It moves like mist, like the early morning light peeling through fog. Slowly, deliberately, you begin to step away, not out of bitterness, but because your hands have held too many pieces of others while your own were falling apart. You retreat into yourself, not as a fortress, but as a forest, vast, alive, untamed. All your life you've been told that your depth is a defect, that your softness is a liability in a world built on speed, noise, and convenience. But what if your depth was never the problem? What if your ability to feel was never a flaw, but a form of wisdom? You've been conditioned to believe that love means availability, that care means surrender, that to empathize is to bleed. But what if empathy isn't about bleeding out for others? What if it's about breathing life into yourself first? You've listened to stories not meant for your ears, held tears not meant for your shoulders, and every time you did, you told yourself it was love. But love doesn't demand erasure. It doesn't ask you to vanish so others can shine. Somewhere along the way, you confused being needed with being seen. But they are not the same. You've been the silent savior, the midnight voice, the hidden pillar. You became a balm for wounds you didn't cause. And when you broke, no one noticed. Because they never saw you. They only saw the comfort you provided. That's the loneliness of the empath. To be surrounded, yet unseen. Needed, but not known. And then it happens. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic goodbye. Just the slow unraveling of the performance. You stop replying instantly. The urgency that once governed your responses fades. You begin to value your time, your energy, your peace. You no longer chase conversations that go in circles. You allow the silence to stretch, not as an absence, but as a space for truth. This is not you becoming cold. This is you warming yourself by your own fire. For the first time, your yes means something because it's no longer automatic. Your presence becomes intentional, sacred, no longer available on demand. You watch as some people recoil, startled by your boundary. They don't recognize this version of you, the version that doesn't bend, doesn't beg, doesn't bleed. But this version of you is the most honest one yet. The one forged in solitude, not shaped by expectation. You don't seek to hurt, but you won't hide your truth to comfort someone else's delusions. You've learned that love without mutual respect is not love, it's servitude. You've stopped carrying the guilt that was never yours, and in its place, you found a quiet kind of freedom. Do you remember when you first learned to silence your needs? When you first believed that being loved meant being useful? Those moments created the mask you've worn for years, the mask of the understanding one, the selfless one. But masks are heavy and you've grown tired. Now the face underneath is ready to be seen, raw and radiant. And some will not like what they see. They will call you changed, accuse you of selfishness. But the truth is, you've finally become whole. You've chosen to remain intact rather than shatter for someone else's comfort. You've stopped translating chaos into compassion. You let others sit with their own discomfort while you sit with your peace. The awakening is subtle but irreversible. You don't need to announce your transformation. You live it. You embody it. You walk into rooms no longer desperate to be liked, no longer terrified of being alone. Your presence speaks volumes. Your silence becomes a boundary. You love still, but not at your own expense. You realize now that boundaries are not walls. They are invitations for respectful connection. You're not closing yourself off. You're inviting in only those who know how to knock with care. The mirror you once held up for others is now turned toward yourself. You see yourself clearly, perhaps for the first time, and what you see is beautiful, resilient enough. Others may try to return you to your old role. They'll test the waters, drop their burdens at your feet, expect the familiar script. But you no longer play that part. You hand them their weight gently and say, "This is not mine to carry." And in that moment, you are not cruel. You are honest. You are sovereign. This new version of you doesn't rescue. It reflects. It doesn't chase. It chooses. It doesn't absorb. It observes. And while the world may not know what to do with this kind of presence, you do. You finally do. You sit in your own company and realize you're not lonely. You're spacious, and slowly, the right people begin to find you. Those who see your soul, not just your service. Those who offer without taking, who listen without demanding, who hold space for your silence as reverently as you once held theirs. With them, love feels like homecoming, not a hostage negotiation. You are no longer available for relationships that require your disappearance. You are no longer seduced by potential, but drawn to presence. You no longer believe that suffering is proof of love. You've seen too much, felt too much, and finally, healed enough to say, "I choose me." And in choosing yourself, you don't close the door to love. You open it wider for love that is real, love that honors, love that builds instead of breaks. You become dangerous not because you harm, but because you refuse to be harmed. Dangerous because you've tasted your own power, and it is quiet, steady, undeniable. This power doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply is. You've returned to yourself, not as a rejection of others, but as a reunion with your own truth. You are no longer the echo of others' needs. You are your own voice, clear and unwavering. And this voice says, "I am enough. I always was. I just forgot. But now I remember." And remembering changes everything. There comes a point when remembrance becomes reclamation, not just of boundaries or energy, but of identity. You start to notice the subtle ways you once folded yourself to fit into spaces too small for your truth. You remember how often you apologized for your existence, shrinking your presence, softening your tone, silencing your pain, not to deceive, but to belong. Yet now you begin to feel the absurdity of that sacrifice. You no longer hunger for belonging at the cost of your wholeness. You stop mistaking fitting in for connection. There's a new awareness within you, a presence that watches each interaction not through the lens of fear, but discernment. Does this conversation nourish me? Does this presence respect me? Does this exchange honor the reciprocity I offer? You start asking questions you once avoided. What would it mean to no longer be the emotional janitor, cleaning up the spills others refuse to acknowledge? What would life look like if you only offered your sacred energy where it could be received, respected, and reciprocated? You begin to understand something most people never dare to learn, that love is not obligation and compassion is not currency. You don't owe anyone access to your spirit simply because they are broken. Your empathy is a gift, not a transaction. And while you once gave endlessly, you now offer mindfully, knowing that love given unconsciously becomes a leash, not a light. This is the moment you begin to see your past not as a tragedy, but as training. Every heartbreak taught you the weight of your worth. Every abandonment revealed the spaces where you once abandoned yourself. You don't resent the lessons anymore. You honor them. They brought you here, to this sacred clarity where you no longer barter your essence for crumbs of care. And those around you, they feel it. Even the ones who don't have the language to name what's changed. Your energy no longer conforms to their need. It confronts it, not with hostility, but with integrity. They ask why you're different. You smile, not because you owe an answer, but because you finally understand that difference is your liberation. The people who once expected you to break yourself for their comfort now feel the boundary like a wall they can't scale. They prod, they poke, they protest. But you remain rooted. You don't raise your voice. You don't defend your stance. Because when you know your value, you don't need validation to protect it. You remember now what it feels like to sit with your own company and feel peace instead of emptiness. Loneliness used to scare you, but that was before you met your real self, the version of you that existed before the world told you who you should be. And now, that self has become your home. This doesn't mean you're closed off. No, you are more open than ever, but you are no longer wide open. You've become a gatekeeper of your own soul, and not everyone deserves entry. Not because they are bad, but because not everyone knows how to love in a way that allows you to remain whole. You begin to realize that peace is your new compass. You follow what feels calm. You choose what feels honest. And when chaos knocks on your door wearing the mask of love, you no longer invite it in out of habit. You meet it at the threshold, look it in the eyes and say, "Not today, not ever again." And there's grief in this growth. Don't mistake that. You mourn the versions of you that gave without pause. You miss the purity of your old love, even if it was laced with pain. But grief doesn't mean regret. It means you care enough to honor what was, while still choosing what now needs to be. This is the paradox of awakening. You love more deeply, but fewer people have access to your love. You care more fiercely, but your care is now held within boundaries. You are softer in spirit, but sharper in discernment. What once felt like contradiction now feels like clarity. You understand now that to truly love someone is to allow them the dignity of their own growth. And that means letting them face their own discomfort, their own consequences, their own healing. You no longer intercept their lessons with your savior complex. You no longer rob them of transformation in the name of kindness. You witness suffering without sacrificing your peace. You offer presence without offering yourself on an altar. You are no longer a sponge. You are a mirror. And some people cannot stand the reflection you offer because it reveals not your change, but their stagnation. And so, people fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because you stopped pulling them closer than they were willing to come. Relationships that relied on your self-abandonment dissolve, but in their place, something remarkable emerges. Genuine connection. The kind rooted not in need, but in mutual respect. You begin to attract people who've done their own work, people who meet you in the middle, who don't demand access to your soul, but earn it through presence, through honesty, through effort. With them, love feels different. It breathes. It doesn't pull. It doesn't drain. It doesn't ask you to dim so they can shine. This is the turning point. The place where the empath no longer walks around with open wounds, waiting to be bandaged by others. You become your own healer. You learn that being full of feeling isn't a burden. It's a gift when held with consciousness. You become fluent in your own emotional language, no longer relying on others to translate your worth. And suddenly, what once felt like survival becomes sacred. Your no becomes a prayer. Your silence becomes a sermon. Your presence, once exploited, now becomes a choice that others must honor. You are no longer afraid to disappoint those who never considered your needs in the first place. This isn't a rebellion. It's a reclamation of your time, your energy, your essence. You are no longer trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You have stopped giving explanations to those who never listened. And in that silence, you find power. You've learned that your job was never to carry the world's weight. Your task was to carry yourself through the world with integrity. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. You were meant to be fully, unapologetically yourself. You've broken the cycle. You've stepped outside the narrative that told you Love meant depletion. Now you write your own story, one where love includes you, values you, honors you. You are not the side character anymore. You are the central figure in your own life. And in this new story, peace isn't a destination. It's your baseline. Love isn't sacrifice. It's exchange. Connection isn't convenience. It's a commitment to mutual presence. You've awakened. You've integrated. You've become the version of yourself that no longer betrays your own heart just to be close to someone else's. And in that becoming, you've unlocked a power no one can take from you, because it was never theirs to give. It was always yours.